Panic Zone. I'm Steve Gruber. I'm America's voice. I'm an America First guy. Let me be clear. I'm here to tell you the truth in black and white. Now, it makes you feel good, so be prepared for that. Here are three big things you need to know right now. Number one, the ATF has issued a broad and likely unconstitutional new rule that will turn gun owners into felons for having a brace on certain pistols. It will not stand for long, that I can assure you. Number two, we're learning from an exclusive story from Michigan News Source that Michigan and Michigan State are working to censor free speech using money, lots of it from the National Science Foundation. I'll explain. And number three, I found the article I was looking for, thanks to one of our loyal listeners. An article I first wrote a decade ago about what would vanish in America during my lifetime. I decided to share. It's an updated version I published on stevegruber.com about 5 years ago in 2018. Here's what I wrote 10 years ago. I remember watching a television show a number of years ago that focused on things that were no longer found in America. The announcer described phone booths, over-the-head hair dryers, old-fashioned barber shops, and drive-in movie theaters that were once all the rage and have now all but disappeared from the American landscape. I was thinking about that on the drive down the street of an upscale suburb near my home and noticed there wasn't a single American flag fluttering in the wind. My grandfather lived his whole life in Hillsdale, Michigan. And I can remember from the first time I ever visited his home that every day just after sunrise, he would put the flag up. And every night, right around sunset, he'd carefully take it down and fold it and put it away for the night. He didn't talk much at all about his pride in being an American, but I guess he didn't need to. You see, because his actions show the deep respect he held for our nation. A few days after Ronald Reagan left the White House in January of 1989, my grandfather passed away unexpectedly and peacefully. I often wonder if he knew something we didn't. I often wonder what my grandfather, my own father, and others that passed before me would think of things that we're seeing today. Professional athletes kneeling and refusing to respect the flag. High school and college kids declaring how awful America is, and grade schoolers getting lawyers to sue for having to hear the Pledge of Allegiance. I wonder if these imbeciles have ever actually traveled anywhere, if their worldview has been created solely in the echo chamber of the far left-wing social media cesspools. Either way, I'm surrounded by ignorance and indifference at an alarming level. I've realized that if we don't get woke as a nation, and soon, we may not have much left to fight for. In fact, it appears that much of it is already slipping away while people stare blankly at devices designed to keep their attention away from what's really happening all around them all the time. Situational awareness is at an all-time low, and under the cover of this self-imposed intellectual darkness affecting tens of millions, there are forces working to remove your freedoms at an ever faster pace. Let me give you some examples of these things that will almost certainly disappear in your lifetime and mine. The right to keep and bear arms will be one of the first things to vanish over the next 50 years. It will be stripped away incrementally so that the total shock of gutting the Constitution will come just one bite at a time. This is how I believe the term progressive was created in the first place. It's a constant and progressive destruction of the protections afforded you by the United States government of God-given rights. Gun ownership is such a quaint idea for liberals, who detest the idea of individual freedoms anyway. They certainly don't believe you have an individual right to self-defense, but rather only a collective one. Destruction of gun rights remains a priority for the power-thirsty progressive movement. Make no mistake, destroying Second Amendment while always proclaiming their support is a cornerstone of the left. We support common-sense gun laws, they'll yell. So those so-called common-sense ideas include you never having access to a gun ever. That's common sense to them. The left has never lost its focus on eliminating the private ownership of firearms altogether. Former President Barack Obama put many radical Marxist ideas out for all to see and then gaslighted many into believing they weren't really seeing what was going on in plain sight by planting the seeds over and over again that we must review and discuss comprehensive gun control. A whole generation has come to believe that having the ability to defend yourself, your family, or your community is somehow on par with being a Nazi, a bigot, or some other factually flawed human being. By the time my youngest son is my age, I seriously doubt the Second Amendment will be intact. In fact, I believe in 50 years' time there will be almost no private ownership of weapons left in America, and not just guns, but most types of archery equipment, knives of certain lengths, and anything else that might cause bodily harm. Possession of certain classes of these weapons will be punishable by very swift and severe zero-tolerance statutes. putting the guilty in prison for long terms, maybe as long as life for some firearms. The freedom of speech in 50 years will be very different than it is today. By that time, many mainstream religions will have been removed from nonprofit status and run into oblivion by an endless barrage of attacks from the left. Churches, in many respects, will be treated like modern-day hate groups and pariahs. The churches will be relegated to a list put together by real hate mongers like the Southern Poverty Law Center. The way gays and lesbians once flocked to secret weekend retreats and holiday adventures to be among their own and be safe is the only way some churches will even survive. They will exist in the shadows like they do in communist China and other totalitarian nations. Churches that do survive in the open will be progressive churches that embrace abortion, transgenderism, homosexuality, and a host of other items that are clearly in conflict with what the Bible teaches. Other religions, however, that teach similar things as Christian doctrine and far worse will still be insulated and protected. The American flag will still exist in some areas, but will not be seen very often. It will be removed from primary and secondary schools and most government buildings because it offends too many people, because they'll claim it represents racism, sexism, and imperialism. School kids will have no idea in 50 years how to recite the Pledge of Allegiance because they'll never have heard it. Most will have never heard the Lord's Prayer either. Think about that. They will instead embrace a diversity and tolerance pledge created by a Congress yet to be elected, and the white children will know from an early age that anything wrong in the world began with their parents and grandparents. Kids will be taught from the beginning that whiteness is something to be shunned and to be ashamed of in America. ATMs will disappear long before we reach the 50-year mark from today. Cash will actually be eliminated much sooner. The financial collapse of Greece, followed by other European Union nations, will usher in the end of the EU and the euro, and in just a few short years, cash in nearly all nations, including the United States. The reasons given for this drastic move will be many. The party leaders will invoke fear of crime, illegal drugs, plus protecting the young and elderly from being preyed upon by crooked bankers and filthy criminals. A vibrant black market will spring up in the shadows, but getting caught could mean the loss of your home, your job, and likely even your freedom. The government will frown heavily on anyone operating outside of the normal boundaries of society. This is just the beginning of the list. I'm going to dig deeper as we continue this conversation, because if we don't wake up, if we don't get woke here, the things that I'm describing today will not be here. And remember, I wrote this 10 years ago. So we're on the clock as far as I'm concerned. I was looking at 2065. Where would the nation be in 2065? Think about that. Drop me your notes at stevegruber.com yourself. You can read the entire column there as well. We'll put it up today. We'll put it up today, and you can read it yourself at stevegruber.com. I'll have more about what will be gone after the break right here. Don't go anywhere.